disaster brings humans together for some reason, and we should be together all the time. But for some reason, you could look at recently in the last 6, 7 months, a hurricane in the South, and there where they have racial problems, there are white people helping black people helping white people, helping their neighbors. And you don't see that till there's a disaster. So that was very noticeable during the earthquake, that everybody was helping everyone else.
Welcome to Matador Memories, a podcast that explores CSUN's history and its impact on the San Fernando Valley in Southern California. I'm Carmen Ramos Chandler, and with me today is CTVA Professor Nate Thomas, head of CSUN's acclaimed film production program, and today we're going to talk about his experiences during the 1994 Northridge Earthquake. So let's start off, Nate. How long had you been at CSUN?
I think this is the 34th year, so it's a long time. And, when you spend 34 years somewhere, it's home. And in most cases, I've spent more time here than home.
So tell me what it was like in the academic year 1993-94.
Interesting time in my life, but in everybody's life. And the interesting part of it is that that earthquake, those years, caused all of us to think about our own immortality or mortality. So it's interesting because so many things that you took for granted weren't there anymore. So many things you took for granted, there was a possibility that they would never come back. And the relationships that you had with folks here at the university and folks in the more broadly, the folks in our world was much different during that time via the earthquake. So it's a very important part of my life to see the students, transformation of students. And some of it was a positive transformation. Some of it wasn't. I had students that were severely impacted by the earthquake via physical damage to their homes, physical damage to their parents' homes, but more so their psyche. They thought about things differently. It was hard to get them to focus moving forward. So there was a lot of things that are memorable as far as when it comes to being an academician.
What was your job at that time in 94?
Well, when the earthquake hit, I was a full-time lecturer, and I had already been hired to be a tenure track faculty starting the fall of 94. So when the earthquake happened, I was still a lecturer. But the memorable part of this was after the earthquake, what were we going to do? Because it was up in the air as to whether this university would open. And then for me, there was several things. Well, if it doesn't open, I'm a lecturer. Do I get paid? I mean, not only me, but other faculty and staff. Do they get paid during this period? I mean, there was those questions. And also, the folks around you. I didn't own a home, but the faculty that worked with me that did own homes, a lot of them had losses. And not knowing if they would return yet, even if the university was going to open. So there was a lot of things that were up in the air right after the earthquake happened. Literally days afterwards, these questions were being asked, and for a while, folks didn't have an answer to it.
Do you remember where you were on January 15th at 4:31 a.m.?
Oh yeah, no, I know exactly where I was. I was sleeping.
Do you remember what it felt like?
Yes, I do, because it threw, and I'm in the Miracle Mile. Well, at that time, I was in the Mid-Wilshire area. And so that's 27 miles away from the university and away from the epicenter. But it threw me out of the bed. I mean, and never in my life have I been thrown out of the bed. Not even pushed out of the bed, I don't think, But I was thrown out of the bed, and things were falling over, and I could just hear breakage, windows breaking. So I knew exactly what it was. It was an earthquake. But the scary part for not only me, but for others is this: is this it, or is it going to be bigger than what what I was feeling. Was that the pre-shock or whatever, a foreshock? But yeah, that I remember. All the sounds, things blowing up, things breaking, automobile alarms going off. And also I start immediately smelling smoke. So, you could smell smoke because there were things that were burning nearby. So that's a memory that I won't forget because I hadn't experienced that before. I mean, there's so many people in our society, and even some of our students that have grown up in war-torn countries. And we've been fortunate that, a war hasn't occurred on our land since the Civil War. So for me, smelling smoke, hearing all this stuff, all the damage, the television wouldn't work, the lights were out. I mean, it was like a war-torn country. And that's something that none of us, I don't think, in this country had experienced that at this point. Yeah.
Do you remember your first glimpse of the campus?
Yeah. It looked like a war zone. Yeah. Or just driving to campus, just going through Northridge and looking at all the damage. Houses thrown off. I saw some houses just thrown off their foundation. There were some of the student apartments on Zelza thrown off their foundation. But yeah, the campus was just a disaster. The parking structure crumbled. It looked like a war zone. And yeah, it was scary. Absolutely scary.
When did you first come to campus? How many days after the earthquake?
Probably within a day or so. Because you wanted to see, the news said that the epicenter was Northridge. So I think it was a couple of days afterwards that I did come to the campus. So it was at its worst at that point. It was really at its worst. So, but keep in mind, even though the epicenter was Northridge, there were damage on all parts of Southern California. And near me, the 10 freeway had collapsed at La Cienega. So that's, again, 27 miles away from the epicenter. So there was damage other places as well. So you did see damage, but the closer you got to Northridge, it obviously got worse. It really did. And so it looked more like a war zone the closer you got to the epicenter.
What did you think when you saw the campus? Did you think it would open? What did you think?
No, I didn't think it would open. No. We didn't think it would open. The other issue we had, the internet existed then, but it wasn't as integral to our lives as it is now. And computers existed then, but they take on a different form and shape now. But what I did learn was, and it caused me to change my behavior a little bit, is that I had my syllabi and all my notes on the old floppy disk. But that floppy disk was in my office. So we didn't have access to it. So my point is that all of my notes, all of that stuff was in an office that I was not allowed to visit. So, and I wasn't the only one that was a victim of that. There were people with their research in their offices that were on floppy disks, and they didn't have access to their offices. So that was I was concerned about that because I obviously can't teach without my notes. And but what happened, several weeks after that, they did allow us in certain buildings. Some buildings you weren't allowed to go in, period, at all. The building that I was in at the time is now Cypress Hall, which was the music building. We were allowed to go in, but with emergency personnel. And they would walk you in there and you could go see if you could retrieve some of the things that you could retrieve. That was shocking as well when I went to my office, the damage in that office. And we had in Cypress Hall, we had these metal bookcases with books on them, obviously. And that was thrown over on my desk, which means that had I been sitting there, it would have been thrown onto me and I would have been severely hurt. Chandeliers were down, cracks in the wall. It looked like a war zone. And but I'm thankful that they did allow us to go in, and I was able to retrieve my floppy disks and some of the other stuff that I would need to continue teaching whenever that were to happen.
Did you hear stories from your colleagues in other departments, other disciplines, like in the sciences or art or whatever, about what their situation was like when they went into their laboratories or their offices?
Oh, you heard stories. And in some cases, some of the stuff that they were working, some of the research was damaged. If you're in the sciences, there's some things that were damaged. But it was the same sort of thing. They had to retrieve that, and in some cases they couldn't. And in the cases where they were able to retrieve it, some stuff was damaged. So even as a university, if we were to open, how do you move forward so quickly? And how do you put all of the things that are needed to teach? How do you put that together? So that was a concern. But I did luck out, and I was able to retrieve the floppy disks that I needed. The actual computer was damaged that was in that office, so I couldn't use that, but I could get the floppy disk. And I remember my mom, rest her soul, she says, and she's old generation, and she at that time didn't understand computers that much, but she did understand that floppy disk thing, you need to get a copy of that and leave it back here in Ohio.
And
I did. And when my mom passed on in 2011, and my sister was cleaning out my mom's safe, there were obviously things in the safe that you keep in a safe. Keep the wills there. You keep all of our birth certificates. In that safe, she had my floppy disk that I had sent after the earthquake.
Wow. Could you access it?
I didn't even try. I don't have anything to play it on. I don't have any. It's that big thing. So no, I have it still, but my mom put it in the safe. So that's yeah. And I never needed it after that. And I forgot that I had given it to her, but she put it in the safe.
You thought when you first came to campus a day or two after the quake, so they're aftershocks, obviously. You thought the campus wasn't going to reopen. What was your reaction when you got word it was going to reopen?
Well, I was happy, but my concern was, and the president at that time made a statement that to have a university or to teach, even with all the disaster around us, she says, you need a tree, a professor, and a blackboard and some chalk. And that is true in most cases and in most majors, but not in, we're now cinema and television arts, but then we were the Department of Radio, Television, Film, not in that department. You need a little bit more. We have studios, we have edit rooms, we have equipment, some of which was damaged. So that wasn't the same for us because we needed those materials to teach the curriculum that we teach. So that was questionable. Would some majors start up, under a tree with a blackboard, and would other majors stay out for the remainder of that semester? So that came up. But eventually, how that was solved, if I recall, the television studio at Glendale College was still intact. So we were able, our television students, because our television studio had some damage, so our students were able eventually to do some of their work over at Glendale Community College. But some of our equipment was damaged, so there was still some challenges there. For our particular major.
But did film resume or?
Yes, we did. We did resume. And how that worked is that our actual film cameras are in cases, which protected them. And some of the light kits are in cases, which protected them. Whereas in the television studio, those are just television cameras sitting on pedestals. Those didn't make it. But some of our actual film cameras did. So with that, we were able to start teaching production again.
Do you remember the first day of classes? The start of the spring semester?
Well, we couldn't start until they brought all these trailers on campus. So that I do remember because the trailers, they were all over the place. You had to find out what trailer you were in. And so that was pretty interesting, trying to find the trailer and then getting used to teaching in a trailer. There were challenges there. The acoustics are different. When you walk in the trailers, it made noises, The trailers had a smell to it. It had its own kind of smell. They did retrofit them with boards and blackboards and even technology at the time would have been projectors. They were retrofitted with projectors, so you did have those tools. But it was still kind of tough getting used to that environment, and the students again getting used to that environment, and then of course the trauma that everybody was feeling in the post all of the post syndrome stuff that everybody was going through was very difficult, because keeping in mind, whereas the losses I had in my apartment were minimal, there were faculty that lost their homes. And so those folks are trying to teach and trying to inspire while they're having their own challenges in their lives. So watching those folks around me, how they dealt with it was disheartening in some cases, because they had millions of dollars worth of damage and loss in their personal lives, and but yet many of them still wanted to do what it is that we do, and that's teach the students. So, but we became almost therapists as well, because you're trying to teach your curriculum, but students had issues, and so you're dealing with those as well, and so that was pretty difficult.
How did you deal with it? How did you become a counselor, even though you're supposed to be just a professor?
Well, we're kind of in it together. So it was almost like, therapy by group, because everybody, it wasn't a situation where they didn't know what you were talking about, or I didn't know what they were talking about. We all had experienced this, but I had this one student I will never forget. He was in one of the buildings that kind of collapsed. So if anything moved in class, he would jump. And eventually, we were in, I think it was trailers on Zelza, which currently would be the area of the student rec center. And the parking structure, one of the parking structures that had fallen was there. And it moved all the time, and it cracked.
That's right, because it settled, because it had collapsed.
It was a very eerie thing. You'll be teaching, and you could hear it. You could just hear it cracking. That was very, very eerie. Now, one funny story was that we were in that trailer, and the parking structure is not that far away, and we could see it out the window, and we could hear it crack, is that Vice President Al Gore came to town. And I was teaching, and right in the middle of the lecture, and the dean walks in and interrupts my lecture and says, we need you to cancel class because we need the Vice President of the United States to speak, and we need that parking structure right behind him for the photo. So it was a prop as well. He's here, so they got to have the damage. So meanwhile, I told the students, well, we've been upstaged by the Vice President of the United States, but the students thought that was funny, that they're going to move us out of class because he needed to be interviewed right in front of that parking structure. So anyway, I thought that was funny.
When the semester ended, how did it feel?
It was tough. And the only thing that you can relate to that would be the pandemic, where you had to grade lighter. And I'm hoping that the students learned what it is they're supposed to learn, but you had to alter the way that you evaluated the students. I mean, you had to. So you had to grade lighter, and you had to cut some of the assignments shorter. There are things that you had to do. So that's what was different, because I felt that I'm hoping that the students got all that they needed, but they probably didn't, because they probably didn't, because we started a little late and under those conditions. And then the technology, the projectors and stuff at times wouldn't work. I mean, there are just a lot of things with trying to put together this MASH kind of unit on a university campus and conduct classes. So there were challenges, but I do have the respect of the administration and the president at that time, and the government, the U.S. government, that worked hard to make sure that happened. And overall it did. And that was amazing that we were able to open up the university, I think about a month after the earthquake. So we weren't that late after the earthquake. We
reopened 2 weeks late.
Okay, so that's not that bad.
And up until that point, it was the worst, up until Katrina, it was the worst natural disaster to hit a public university in the history of the United States.
Yep.
It was $250 million
Yep.
just to this campus.
Yep. It was, it's a war zone. It was sad. The good thing, once the campus opened, is that, even in the summer now, you miss your students. That's what we do here. Students are our product. And so when you're with the students, there's a certain satisfaction, and that's therapeutic as well. So I'm glad that it did open because once the school started, it was 2 weeks late, but you were ready to see students and to see how they're doing and to be around that environment and also see your colleagues. You were ready to see the other faculty, even though many of them had challenges and losses in their own lives. You were ready to see them. Yeah.
Do you remember, was it about 2 weeks after the campus reopened, back when we used to have weather, the rain?
That I don't remember.
The mud?
No, now the mud I remember, but now I do remember the mud. And that was a problem, obviously. Yep, that was a problem. But the trailers alone on the campus, I mean, I saw a picture recently from that era of the earthquake, and it just, students today have no idea what this campus looked like because there was 300 or 400 trailers. It did not look like a university campus. It looked like, I don't know what it looked like, but it
was, 500 trailers and about 200, 300 Mylar domes?
Yeah. That was another thing was, I call it the MASH units, this big, to go visit the provost or to go visit HR, you had to go into the massive dome. And it was really bizarre.
Remember the echoes?
Yep. Very bizarre. The temporary furniture and those things, but it's amazing they made it happen, which also shows you the human spirit. And disaster brings humans together for some reason, and we should be together all the time. But for some reason, you could look at recently in the last 6-7 months, a hurricane in the South, and there where they have racial problems. There are white people helping black people helping white people, helping their neighbors. And you don't see that till there's a disaster. So that was very noticeable during the earthquake, that everybody was helping everyone else. And that's the human spirit. But I think that human spirit should exist past an earthquake.
Do you remember to touch on that, I came in June of that year. But what I remember was an incredible sense of camaraderie and the sense of titles didn't matter.
Did not. No, it did not. And I think one of the reasons is when we look up, and it's the same thing here, when you really realize life is short. And regardless of how much money you have or what your title is, we will all spend a certain amount of time on earth and we will all die. And money can't, in most cases, can't change that. And I think when you go through a disaster like the earthquake, we're all in this together or we wouldn't have gotten through it. So titles did not matter. The president walked the campus just as if, very casually. So
jeans and a sweatshirt.
Yeah.
Remember that? Jeans and a sweatshirt.
We all did because, and but titles didn't matter at that time. We all realized that, we're all here together to create the space for us to move forward as a university. But also, I think when you question your own mortality and you question your own being, those are the kinds of things, those disasters make, even if you have a lot of money and if you have a title, it really brings you down to the equal level with everybody else. It really does. And any disaster does that when you realize, life can end just like that. And so the earthquake kind of proved that to everybody. That it got us all in check. And, when you see, freeways falling, well, you could have been on that freeway. And there were people on those freeways that died. The 14 freeway fell. I mean, it was a different day and time, and people forgot about titles.
That's it for episode 4 of Matador Memories. Tune in to episode 5 as we continue our conversation with film professor Nate Thomas about his time at the university during the 1994 earthquake and how the campus recovered.